Hey everyone, welcome to the program, WRSA Radio. I am your host, Grenadier1. As always, I hope you're having a good week. I'm still on the mend a little bit from last week and, kind of getting back into more complete form, if you will. If you missed my post on Gab, I didn't do a video last week because I've been suffering from what I think was the Omicron, Megatron, Voltron version of the coof, whichever one it was. I began running a fever kind of out of the blue on Sunday of last week, Sunday evening, which is very odd. Generally, when I get sick, there's some kind of indicator, some kind of lead up to it, and I can tell that it's coming. This was just kind of bam, right out of the blue. So Monday I was in bed all day. Tuesday is when it kind of got interesting. About midday on Tuesday, I decided that I'd had enough. I had to get up, regardless of how I felt, and get a shower. Just try to do something that would, help me feel better. And to be honest, I just couldn't keep laying around anymore. So I get up and I go to get in the shower. And it was at this point that my fever decided that it was going to break. So I start pouring sweat and I get dizzy and lightheaded and I could feel it coming. So I kind of sat down, started to sit down in the floor, and I passed out and fell into the door frame of the closet door. So I wake up and my wife's banging on the door. She comes in. She's, oh my God, I heard a fall and I heard you moaning and, she's trying to help me get set up and everything. And I get cleaned up and then I said, okay, well, I got to go into hydration mode and start getting as much fluid back into me as I can. So I'm drinking Pedialyte and, electrolytes and water for a couple of days after that. And I did feel better because, the fever broke and everything. However, the next day is when I really began to feel the effects of falling into that door frame. And I had just kind of hit square on my neck and shoulders. And I was just so sore that it was just miserable. I couldn't sit up. I couldn't really lay down. And I spent more time really recovering from that fall than the actual sickness. But so it was kind of a rough time. But anyway, I'm much better now. I'm back to, like I said, almost 100%. But that's been my last couple of weeks. So I hope yours was much better. But anyway, let's get to the main topics of the show today. We have a couple of honorable mention this week that could have been show topics, but I suspect that you all have heard enough about them already, so they're not something that I'm really going to go into deep about. But basically, the first off is Whoopi Goldberg, who learned this week that the victimhood status of blacks in the United States is not as high on the scale as the victimhood status of Jews. She learned that lesson very harshly, and there's been a lot of digital ink spilled on that topic, so I'm not really going to go into it any more than that, and it's Hollywood nonsense anyway. So, it is what it is. And the second thing, the recent uptick in the ATF raiding gun dealers over these so-called forced reset triggers, as well as the arrest of YouTuber CRT Firearms over the not a machine gun little metal business card. Both of these are very interesting bits of news, and we could, probably do a whole show on them, but there's already so much out there, and I don't really have a very different take or an additive take on it, so I'm just going to point you to these other YouTube channels and other outlets out there, venues for the information on those things. Like I said, it's interesting. I think there's some just sort of interesting legal things going on there that we'll have to see kind of play out. I think eventually some of that will get thrown out of court because it's absolute nonsense. But we'll see. But anyway, so what are we going to discuss today? Well, I think it's important that we talk about the honkening that is happening up in the Great White North. And I am, of course, referring to the massive Ottawa trucker protest taking place in Canada. It's to protest Canada's implementation of a vaccine mandate for truckers crossing the border into the U.S. Last weekend, the trucks began rolling into Ottawa, and once they arrived in sufficient numbers, they began to honk, and honk, and honk, and they've not stopped honking since. The Twitters began to fly from all over these urbanite liberals who were trapped in the city with the truckers, and they began to accuse them of all kinds of bad behavior and complain about the honking. It took just a matter of hours, and people were already breaking down. These people are so soft, after all, and they could not take the noise. The screenshots of the tweets were just hilarious. It was fun to read. It was magnificent. Okay, if you haven't seen some of that, I'll try to grab some and put them on the screen for you to see those. But yeah, just some really, really funny stuff. And I'm sure you guys have seen this, so why am I choosing to highlight this as a topic this week? Well, I want to tie this to a couple things that I think are very important lessons for us to learn here. And it looks very much like the truckers are going to achieve a victory there in Canada. There was already some signs of cracking already appearing. And I think it's just a matter of time before Bitch Boy Castro Jr. folds and backs off of those mandates. The takeaway from this, I think, is that there is power among the blue-collar skilled workers. This is not really a new take, by the way. It's something that the left has seen for a long time. See, it's not the honking that's going to break them. It's the fact that 50,000 truckers who own their own rigs are in Ottawa for weeks, and that means they're not out hauling freight on the road. And the shortages that people have already been feeling are going to get worse over the next week or two. And it's going to become more and more apparent what the impact of this actually is. And that is something that replicates across multiple industries all over the Western world, modern life, you know. This is not really organized labor that goes on strike, which I generally don't agree with because it's just so ripe for socialism and communism abuse, you know. These are independent owners who band together and decide to stop work. It's kind of like management deciding that they're going to stop work and go on strike. They own the means of their labor. They own their rigs. They drive for themselves, and they decided that they could not afford to accept these mandates, and the risk and loss of a few weeks of work is better than losing it all. Now that's power, folks. That is something that many, many other industries can replicate. Many skilled lines of work are people who own their own businesses and contract that work out to others. And when they are impacted by decisions like this, they can organize a protest, just like truckers, and they can achieve great things by it. Now, it has to be vital industries, of course, but there are many things that people may not think are vital that really are. Things that most people do not think twice about, calling when there's a problem, and they have this expectation that the businesses will just pick up the phone and just jump right on fixing it for them. So what I'm talking about, industries like plumbers and electricians, HVAC, many, if not most of these industries are exclusively small businesses who have independent control over the job. And they can decide that they want to organize work stoppages and shut their businesses down for weeks if they want to do that to achieve a political goal. Now imagine if truckers in the U.S. decide that they're going to support the Canada protests, which appears to be an idea that's gaining traction. We're already seeing some some organization. In fact, they had a Facebook page that was up, which Facebook, of course, shut down, trying to organize a convoy, a freedom convoy, if you will. I don't know exactly where they were going to drive to. I think they were going to go to D.C. And that may be something that still happens. I just don't know. They, like I said, they shut the page down, so I don't know how much traction it got, how much following it got before they put the kibosh on the page. But imagine if they reach out to the trades and organize sympathetic protests from those industries. Now, again, I'm not talking about a strike in the traditional sense where it's, workers walking off the job to the disagreement of the managers and the business owners. This is not something that is a conflict between management and craft, as we used to call it. This is owners shutting down as well and walking out with their workers. And imagine how quickly things would come to a screeching halt if critical industries did that. Now, the idea is not new. As I said, it's something that has happened in Europe many times. France, very specifically. We've had, these types of things happen before. These types of protests and strikes and sympathetic work stoppages and things like that. If you remember the yellow vest from a few years ago, that was a very similar situation. This is just something that we typically do not see in the U.S. because these types of actions are usually the purview of the left, and they're usually done to promote more division between management and labor and kind of spread this socialist idea around. So that's something that, as I said, is just far too ripe with communist sympathies in my eye. And so it's not really something that I normally would have promoted or really would have thought would been a good idea. And I don't think most people in the United States would think that. We've kind of come to we've been taught that for years, that this was something that was really something that the left did. It's not something that we see often. But maybe it's time that we change that. Maybe it's time that we recognize a political block of power where it is at and motivate that block into action to achieve a goal. So here's the tie-in that I wanted to get to. Over the last 20 years, we've seen something taking place in the U.S. education system that we've talked about before. I've mentioned it before on this program. It's been something that we've talked about on boards and so on. And I'm talking about the absolute stranglehold on academia that the left has. And we've very long lamented the state of modern U.S. universities. And we've spoken often about, not sending your children off to these centers of indoctrination, not running up these massive student loan debts, and earning nothing but a worthless piece of paper that hardly qualifies you to make French fries. Now, what has been the suggestion to counter this? What have we been saying for a long time is the better alternative to this route for young people? And that, of course, is the trades. Those industries that we were talking about. We've been encouraging young males, particularly, to go into the trades by attending trade school. And you get out of school quicker, it's far less expensive, and you go right into the job making pretty decent money with, the prospect of raises to come on a pretty regular basis after you've put in some time with a company. This is something that my son has done, okay? And it's paying off for him in great measures. He's in the HVAC industry. He spent a year in school. He did an internship with a company. And they hired him right out of school when he graduated. He's been there about a year, a little over a year. And, he's driving a company van. He gets plenty of overtime. He loves the work. It's fantastic. He's just having a great time. But folks, this is the way. And I would hazard to guess that the vast majority of these industries are conservative males with the office workers probably being more conservative females. And a mass movement into these trades by conservative young people could put them almost exclusively into the hands of our camp. The problem we have to deal with are the unions that dominate some of these trades. If you can get enough replacements to force out the old boomers who, vote liberal because they continue to believe that the DNC is the party of the working man, then this is an achievable goal here. I think we have to make a concerted effort to educate these young people going into the trades about the nature of things and why it's important that they shut down those old liberal types still hanging around in the industries. I'm not talking about forcing them out. I'm talking about just, hey, look, shut up. We're not doing it your way anymore. And when the control is firmly there, then there's a lot of political power that can be wielded. And that's not even getting into the level of independence that these young people will have if they're in positions to run their own businesses. Many of these trades are license type jobs that you do some time in the job, and then you get your license as a licensed electrician, licensed plumber, whatever. And then you're able to start your own business and run your own crew, do your own thing. There are critical shortages in the job market for these jobs, and that means that there are even more programs out there that will help even pay your way through school. My son had this happen. He had the money for school. We had made that happen for him. We had plenty of money in an education savings account that we set up for him, to cover the full cost of going to trade school. And when we went to sign him up, we didn't even know about this, and we learned about a program in the state of Georgia at the time that was in place that paid for the classes. So we paid up front, and then they would reimburse him for the cost of the class. So basically all we paid for were books and fees. And that was it. So his education fund went really untouched, and we were able to just set that money aside for him to give him a nice cushion for moving out on his own, for the future. He's got a nice nest egg there. And that's assuming he decides not to go back to school and get some more education in his field. There's other things in the HVAC industry, controls and what they call building automation these days. And so that may be something that he decides he wants to go into and go back to school, and maybe use some of that money to pay for that course, so he could get a more advanced degree or second degree for the cost of one, basically. He's able to begin his independent life with no debt and sitting on a good savings account that keeps him from being a slave to his job. He has some freedom to move around, can decide exactly what he wants to do as he gains experience at the company that he's working at. That's real power, friends. Okay, getting yourself into a position that you are not a slave to your wage. It's the best thing that we can do for this generation. Put them in a position to succeed. The bankers can't control you if they do not have you chained to a debt. So teach them this. Even if you are in that position yourself, use yourself as an example of what not to do. Okay? Tell them from experience. And if you are in that position, do what you can, absolutely can, to get out of that position. I've spoken about this before. This is something that I've done. My wife and I worked very hard to get ourselves in the position where we do not have any debt. And I cannot tell you how liberating it feels. To know that if I absolutely needed to, I could go without a job for a while. It's truly liberating. Like I said, they can't control you. They just don't have the sway over you when you're not a slave to your wage. One more item this week before I go. I spoke about some conditioning hikes with myself and Concerned American. Well, we have the first one. Next Saturday, I believe it's the 12th, Concerned American and I will be at a park in Gwinnett County, Georgia at 10 o'clock, 1000 hours. And we'll be stepping off about 10 minutes after 10. Gives some time for folks to show up. To do a 2-mile walk. Bring a small pack and we'll do a little cooking. Everybody kind of make their own thing for breakfast or whatnot, or early lunch if you want. So bring a meal. After we walk, we'll fix something up and have some good fellowship, some good face-to-face meet space time. Now, I will post the exact park and the meeting spot in the description, and we'll get Pete to post kind of repeat all that on the mothership in that post, so you'll be able to know exactly where we're going to be. I look forward to seeing you guys, and I'll mention it again next week on the show as well, just to remind you if you've forgotten. But if you can't make it, sorry. Maybe you can make one in the future. We're gonna do these, do them often. So keep watching this space for information about that. Well, anyway, guys, that's all I got time for this week. Like and subscribe. Come see me over on Gab and the Mothership, and I will see you on the next episode.